gloomy continues next. AM 560 Weather Center forecast. Clouds and sun throughout the day, warmer, more humid, and that will develop into a gusty thunderstorm by later in the day after 4 p.m. High 87, humid, thunderstorm, low 68 overnight. Cloudy and 68 right now. Next news at 8, and Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. The Kamala Vault. All of the instant classics we've collected from the vice president over the last 3.5 years. Actually, going back a little bit further, when she was running for president the first time in 2020, she did a CNN town hall and was asked about plastic straws, one of the burning issues of our time, whether or not she supports the ban.
Do you ban plastic straws?
I think we should. Yes. I mean, look, I'm going to be honest. It's really difficult to drink out of a paper straw when if you don't gulp it down immediately, it starts to bend. Yes. And then, the little thing catches it. And then, so we got to kind of perfect that one a little bit more.
Oh, yeah.
No, she didn't.
So we asked Brett Baer if he knew whether or not Kamala would be rolling out the design of her food ration coupon at today's announcement about the proposed imposition of price controls on big grocery. I would also add, what are we doing? Plastic straw is going to be sold at the federally overseen grocery stores, or is Kamala going to have her own government-engineered paper straw that addresses that gulping problem that she highlighted?
I don't know. Well, the straw bend is the pressing question.
These are important questions. Maybe our next guest, our friend Bjorn Lomborg, can help. He is the president of the Copenhagen Consensus think tank. He's also the author of Best Things First. Bjorn, welcome. Thank you for joining us again.
Hey, Dan.
And obviously, the issue of plastic straws has subsided a bit. But, that tortoise still has that plastic straw in his nostril. And until that nostril is cleared, I'm not going to let the issue of banning plastic straws die.
Yeah. Look, I think plastic straws, and I hope to a certain extent that it increasingly has become the signature of how we often end up worrying about very, very small and insignificant things. First of all, I mean, there's much more pressing issues like air pollution for people. But if you do care about plastics in the oceans, maybe we should be concerned about the vast majority that comes from fishing equipment. And of course, also remember, why did most of the non-fishing equipment plastics end up in the ocean? It was because we exported our recycled plastic to places like China, Indonesia, and Vietnam, because it was too expensive to deal with at home. And when we sold it to somewhat dubious people, they decided, it's just easier to dump it in the ocean. This is fundamentally an outcrop of the fact that we wanted to recycle, but we didn't want to pay for it.
And there's floating islands of garbage, aren't there, which just is filled with recyclables?
There is this specific plastic patch. Sure, when you actually go there, most of it is not at all visible, but it's there. But again, what do we care more about? If we're going to talk about pollution, shouldn't we be talking about the stuff that actually kills kids rather than the things that looks aesthetically displeasing when you're out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean?
Yeah, it's funny. It's shocking that a communist party would turn out not to be a great steward of the environment. Gosh, we've never heard that story before. But it does speak to sort of first principles, particularly as you have a major presidential candidate rolling out Soviet price controls today on food. Private enterprise and stewardship of the natural world, those are complementary. They're not in opposition to one another.
Well, they certainly can be. Again, remember, it used to be that thinking smartly about environment wasn't a partisan issue. It was Nixon who instituted the first air pollution regulation. And there's a strong argument for saying we do want to have a good environment, but we also need to recognize that doing so has real costs. And so when the costs are fairly small and the benefits are enormous, we should obviously be doing it. But likewise, much of what we worry about with climate change has the opposite signature. We have a situation where there is a problem with climate change, but often what we can do about it, can we only do a little and at an incredibly high cost. And so again, let's get back to thinking smartly about what really works. What are the ways to think about this? And of course, one of the things that I've written about this week is really the whole idea of the green transition that everybody's talking about, as if it's not only inevitable, but it's happening right now, that we're somehow magically transitioning the world to a green economy. We're no such thing. We had the largest emissions ever in the world's history last year. We use much, much more fossil fuels. We also get much more energy from solar and wind, but that's mostly because we subsidize it immensely. And so the reality is, as long as fossil fuels are much more both available and reliable, but also often cheaper, we really have a situation where most of the world just keeps using more and more of it because they want to lift their populations out of poverty.
So
What
how
about
much are, oh,
what about memes? We learned earlier this week from a British professor that the ubiquity of memes is a threat to the planet's survival. Because every digital communication that has a carbon footprint, and so we need to do something about getting meme free, maybe by 2035 or 2040.
Oh my God, I missed that.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm clearly unplugged from that one.
Ian
But,
Hodgkinson, I think, is his name.
What this shows, there's so many people who are arguing we need to fix climate change by telling people what not to do. And it seems to have escaped them that most people actually want, certainly in democracies, but even in China and elsewhere, they actually resent being told, I'm sorry, you have to be poorer and colder and less comfortable, and you can't drive your car and can't go on an airplane, that kind of thing. Most people are not going to accept that sort of thing. What we need to do, if we actually want to fix problems, is to find innovation that makes it possible for us to fix these problems cheaply and have more opportunity. We didn't fix the air pollution in Los Angeles in the 1960s and 70s, telling people they can't drive. We fixed it with the catalytic converter, tiny gizmo that cost a couple $100, and then allows your car to drive much further and pollute much, much less.
A good
and now they're
example.
being stolen in Chicago.
Well, yes, there is that problem too. I'm not promising we can fix all problems, but we can actually find really smart solutions to a lot of the world's problems, and we should be focused on that. And instead, we seem to be, I think the real problem with memes is that we seem to think that this is about, let's all go net zero. That sounds like a nice thing until you realize it's going to cost each person on the planet, or at least in the rich world, $10,000 to $25,000 per year. That's not a vote winner.
It's exactly. That's not a vote winner. That's the problem, isn't it? It's tough to be a guy who lives in the real world talking about trade-offs like you are and being a pragmatic solutionist when you're up against people promising utopia. Utopia sounds so much better.
Yeah, but it only sounds better if you don't think too hard, right? Because a lot of these people are really telling you that this is, we should have degrowth. You've become too rich. You've become too comfortable. We should all go back and sort of farm our own vegetables and stuff. And most people who actually do this, it sounds really nice at first, but of course you realize there's a reason why you buy most of the stuff from a grocery store, because most of us are not very good at this. And it won't be very fulfilling to spend most of your days out tilling in the sun.
Yeah, the great Franco-Czech novelist Milan Kundera, he said about this, and this is so applicable to this save the world eco-supremacy movement. He wrote, once the dream of paradise starts to turn into reality, however, here and there, people begin to crop up who stand in its way, and so the rulers of paradise must build a little gulag on the side of Eden. In the course of time, this gulag grows ever bigger and more perfect, while the adjoining paradise gets ever smaller and poorer. That's sort of how it actually plays out.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back in the history of environmentalism, 50 years ago, or actually 52 years ago, we had the first global environmental summit in Stockholm in 1972. And back then, they told us we have just 10 years left to fix all our problems in the world. And ever since, we've just been told about this endless array of damaging stuff that would happen. And we've been told that we need to mend our ways and stop our growth and stop doing a lot of the things that, in many ways pull people out of poverty and make the world richer. And I'm pretty sure most of us are actually happy now that we didn't heed their calls back then. And we should probably be a little worried about heeding their call now.
Where do you come down on things that have gotten some profile, like federal and state subsidies to bring foreign EV battery manufacturing plants to places like exurban Illinois, forgetting even that it's a Chinese communist-backed business. Could talk about Goshen. Just the idea that government at the federal or state level should be in the business of subsidizing EV battery production, subsidizing the purchase of Tesla, subsidizing the construction of windmills on farmland, and so forth.
It's an incredibly inefficient policy. Look, there is an argument to say that there are some things we want to do to cut carbon emissions, but you should be aware of how much it costs for each ton of CO2 that you're cutting. And most of these policies are incredibly expensive and much, much more expensive than pretty much anything else you could do. And of course, what happens is that you very often, certainly with electric vehicles, end up subsidizing rich people buying their second virtue signaling car. And of course, also remember, most electric cars are much heavier than their similar gasoline-driven counterparts. And we know that heavier cars actually cause more deaths in traffic overall. So it's likely that what we're seeing as we get more and more heavy electric cars, that we have more deaths in society. And of course, that may actually outweigh the total net climate benefits of these cars. This is just one of those many things that when you start thinking about it, it was a Nature article a couple of years ago, when you start thinking about it, your paradise turns into a much less beautiful version of reality.
Speaking of those utopians of a different sort, the Bill Gateses and the Klaus Schwabs. Bill Gates wants to re-engineer cows to deal with the flatulence issue, bury trees in the Pacific Northwest. Klaus Schwab wants 15-minute cities where you live in a little box and you eat your bugs and you take public transport to work in somewhere and so forth. I mean, what about all this sort of re-engineering the human and animal, for that matter, condition?
Well, I'm probably a little less skeptical than you are of this, but there's obviously some worrying trends. But again, look at New York, which is very densely populated, where you have a good public transport system. Very few people don't just walk or take the subway to work, and it actually works in many ways. So you can get these communities, but of course you have to be weary of politicians just sort of enforcing this. And it's not going to work in many other places. I'm pretty sure it wouldn't work in Chicago nearly as well. But there are some good incidences. We're seeing a lot of places in Europe where you're actually closing off the middle of the city to cars, except for in the morning when they bring in goods and stuff. And that actually makes for a more livable city. There are some ways this can work. Likewise with the cows, methane from cows is a problem. If we could fix it easily, that'd be cool. But again, let's be wary of this, we're going to re-engineer the world and you're going to be much poorer, which is not going to be working, certainly not in democracies, and certainly not something we would want in the long run.
Bjorn Lomborg, president of the Copenhagen Consensus think tank, author of Best Things First. Bjorn, thanks as always.
Dan, good to talk to you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Do you have jewelry with sentimental value that needs repairing? Hi, it's Mike Gallagher. I'm a customer of family-owned Roland's Jewelers in downtown Libertyville because it's a place I trust. Their in-house master jeweler does impeccable work, and jewelry comes back repaired in perfect condition and looks the same as the day you bought it. That's a great feeling. Roland's also specializes in custom design. They'll work with you every step of the way to make your dream jewelry idea come to life. The Roland's family is expertly trained to give you outstanding customer service, earning 5-star